Alright, so this is my Think Aloud for the article Critics of Shelters Bark for Pet Perfection by Logan Jenkins. He starts off the article by saying an uprising among county animal shelter volunteers chronicled by San Diego Union Tribune reporter Jeff McDonald forced me into a field trip to a familiar and heart-wrenching place. So just to say, this is an article that goes hand in hand with Jeff McDonald's Union Tribune article. That article is basically an informative article talking about the outreach of volunteers complaining about mistreatment at the animal services shelters. And the way that Jenkins refers to the shelter as a familiar place, it makes me believe that maybe he volunteered there once or he adopted an animal there once. Not really sure. I wish he had made that more clear. Alright. And then he just talks more about Jeff McDonald's article here, and then he says, to those who feed on moral outrage, this is a storyline with 4 legs. Few failings roil the conscience more than systematic cruelty to animals. I just want to say that I really like how he uses animal puns in this article. For example, he compares the storyline to something with 4 legs, like a dog. It just really fits in with the topic really well. But this sentence, it's really talking about how the cruelty really tugs at our heartstrings. That's basically all it's about. Alright. And then the next sentence I really agree with, because he says, but I've found over the years that the truth is usually somewhere in the middle of the barking packs. What he means by this is that a lot of the time we see mistreatment or neglect in dogs that aren't most likely to get adopted very fast. Unfriendly dogs or misbehaving dogs, maybe dogs that don't adapt well to shelter life and just probably aren't getting adopted very fast is what he's referring to. And then he says, naturally part-time volunteers, far removed from staffing shortages, union budgets, yearn for a utopian setting for innocent animals. Anything less shocks the heightened conscience. So at this point, I was thinking, well, I wasn't really sure of what Jenkins' position was in this article on the topic, on the scandal. I was thinking maybe he believed that the volunteers were out of line for speaking out, but we figure it out in the rest of the article. Right, and then he says, so there's the yin and yang, the split screen through which I view periodic stories of abuse in animal shelters. What I think he means by this is the comparison of the Humane Society and the Animal Services Department shelters. There's a big difference between the two, and he'll explain that more. He says, but you know what this inherent tension is, despite the scratching and clawing for PR advantage, by and large a catalyst for progress. I just want to point out, he says, another animal pun, scratching and clawing, as an animal would do, but what he means by this is that, yes, there is tension because of the volunteers' outbreak in the animal service department, but it's a good thing because it'll make people more aware, and it's progress for the shelter. It'll make them change their ways in one way or another. Alright, so then he's talking about how he went to the Mission Valley campus, and it's a campus for the county's Department of Animal Services and next door the San Diego Humane Society. It's basically just a campus, and they're really close to each other. They're 2 shelters really close to each other. And he says, I'm not sure if most San Diegans appreciate how novel it is that these 2 enterprises, one taxpayer funded, the other private, are linked at the hip like conjoined twins. It's like putting the Bishop School next to San Diego High. However, the proximity makes comparison inevitable. So this is basically where he starts comparing the two and how it really doesn't make sense that they're right next to each other, because it does indeed make comparison inevitable. Alright, so he says, for example, one former county volunteer told McDonald they were euthanizing perfectly good dogs to make space for other dogs coming in, not devoting enough effort to getting the existing dogs adopted. They have the perfect role model in the San Diego Humane Society, but the difference is like night and day. And then he includes another quote, I guess, from veterinarians who have seen animal abuse at the shelter too. And I really like how he used these two examples in his article, because I think they're really the most memorable from McDonald's article, and they're a really good example to back up his opinion on the comparison of the two shelters. And then he says, when you walk into the Gain Street campus, veer left and you're in the county's central shelter, underwritten in part by Joan Croak and the Copley family, where dogs and cats reside in sort of clean, if Spartan kennels. At first glance, I thought the dogs had tiny trampolines in their cells. No, elevated beds. I've seen these beds before in shelters, and I agree, they're really weird and they don't look comfortable. He talks more about this, so we'll go back to that. Back at the entrance, turn right, and just beyond the outdoor coffee shop, and you're in, well, a 5-star hotel with a warm and fuzzy gift shop. So here, I wish he had made it more clear, but he's now talking about the Humane Society shelter. If you've never been there, you probably wouldn't really know that he's talking about the Humane Society now, so I do wish he made that more clear there. But anyway, he said, walk to the end of the spacious lobby, look through a picture window, and you'll see a tastefully furnished sitting room. Inside, ruling this scene of domestic bliss, are 2 deliciously fat cats. And the message of this museum-style staging, your interior decorating is not complete without a furry feline curated by the society. So right here he's basically saying, like, applauding the Humane Society for using that tactic. They're like putting 2 cute cats in a cute room, and it's making people think, hey, I want those cats for my room, and I agree. He said, a number of societies' adoptable pooches hang out in private rooms with toys and human-sized easy chairs for their comfort. For these lucky dogs, life might never be so genteel. Pinot Grigio with your kibble, sir? So basically, here's a pretty good comparison for the Humane Society and the animal services. They do, if you've never been there, they do have really nice furniture in their little kennels. And they're really not that little for a big dog. They have little couches, little chairs, fit for a human, but the dogs get to sleep in them. It's really cute. It looks really comfortable. Compared to the tiny trampoline beds that he mentioned before, they look a lot more comfortable. Alright, and he says, over in the county shelter, such al fresco jaunts are not part of the daily room service, a source of friction with current and fired volunteers. So here he's talking about the issue of walking at the animal service shelter. Here he mentions that McDonald quoted Dawn Danielson, the director of the Animal Service Department, and she says that walks are nice, but suggests that it's also important that dogs learn to eliminate in their kennels to avoid infections, a kind of reverse housebreaking that new owners are sure to appreciate. So that's a big issue there at the shelter right now. The dogs aren't getting walked enough. That's a lot of things that the volunteers have complained about currently. So yeah, it's a big comparison between the Humane Society, who takes their dogs 2 or 3 times a day for 15-minute walks, and then the animal service shelter. So he says, with tone-deaf statements like these, Danielson runs the risk of being caricatured as a Dickinson figure, an orphanage director finds volunteers who just want to give poor kennel-crazed dogs some fresh air, the canine equivalent of Victorian soup. So, what he's saying here is a little harsh, but I do agree with him. I think dogs should be walked every day. And probably a lot of their kennel-crazed dogs really do just need some fresh air, and maybe that's why they're kennel-crazed. And that's another big issue at the shelter. They're getting, too many dogs are getting euthanized, and maybe that could be a cause of it. Not enough walks. Makes them a little crazy. But anyway, he says, to be fair, the big graph is going in the right direction. The definition of adoptable animal has steadily expanded. Kennel conditions have improved. Rescue is the most socially desirable adjective there is for a pet. So what he's saying here is that people are adopting a lot more from kennels. They're getting a lot more rescue dogs rather than buying from a breeder, and it's a really good thing because there's millions of dogs in shelters all over the country. And what he's saying here is that we've really gone a long way. And he also says, but to also be fair, volunteers have played an important role in the evolution of compassion, never more so than when they challenge the system to strive for perfection. So, in Jenkins' conclusion, he's really saying that kennel conditions have improved and volunteers have played a huge role in that. They're not only their help, but also when they speak about the mistreatment, it really helps. And it can make a huge difference because people listen to volunteers. They trust volunteers, I guess you could say. They have high pedestals for volunteers because they're good people, obviously. And when they speak about these things or they start these scandals, I guess you could say, it makes people more aware, and it forces the shelters to change for good. And it's good because we hopefully start to see animals in the animal services shelters be treated with more respect.